In this video, we are going to complete our to-do application by completing all the functionality that was missing from the previous videos. So right now, if you look at our application, how it works is if you type any to-do, something like swimming, and press enter, that will be added at the end of the to-do list. And when you click on cross button, it will delete it. When you click on checkbox, it will complete and not complete. Similarly, you can delete multiple one of them. In this video, we'll try to make these things active. Along with that, we'll add support for local storage. So let's have a look and go through our application where it is and the code review. So here we have a variable called all to-dos that contains all the to-dos. We are selecting two elements, UL root and to-do input. We are adding an event listener on to-do input of type key up, and when that happens, we have to call this function add to-do. So add to-do function gets an access to event. We are checking if key code is 13 and event.target value is a truthy value. It means that if it is empty, it will not work. So if we press enter, it will not keep added because of this reason. As soon as that happens, then we add the new to do with a name and is done property to our all to do variable. Along with that, we are resetting the value of event.target.value to empty string. At last, we are calling this function createUI. So now let's look at the function createUI. CreateUI function takes an array of data and by default, it defaults to all to-dos. That's why when you're calling this function, it defaults to all to-dos, and all to-dos is our single source of truth or the main data. The first thing we are doing is setting the inner HTML to empty, looping over all the data and creating the structure. Here we'll see that in input and span, we are adding a data attribute of id with I. I is our index coming from for each. On input element, we are adding an event listener of type click, and when that happens, you have to call the function handle check. Let's look at that function. So handle check gets access to event. We take out the value of data attributes from dataset.id, and then we change the value of is done from true to false and false to true. And after changing or updating our state, we are calling createUI again. That will re-render and our UI will be updated. The same case is happening with span.addEventListener of type click, and when that happens, you have to call the function handle delete. Handle delete function gets access to event object. We take out the ID from dataset. We splice, means we delete specific element, and then call createUI again. And here createUI, we are not passing any parameter because of this default value. So till this point, our add to do, delete to do, and toggle to do is working. What we need to do now is when we click on all, active, and completed, this should be working. So how this should work is when you click on all the to-dos should be visible. But when you click on active, only the to-dos that is active, it means that learn DOM, should be visible. When you click on completed, only to-dos that is completed should be visible here. Clear completed removes all the completed to-dos from the to-do list. So let's see how we are going to approach it. The first thing we need is by default, it should be on all tab. So by default, the all button will be selected. So for that, we are going to create a variable default selected is equal to all. Now what we need to do is add an active class to it. So for that, we will need access to all these 4 buttons. So how we are going to get access to all these 4 buttons is we'll add a class of all. Similarly, we'll add a class active, completed, and clear. After that, we'll select all those 4 elements into different variables. So now we have all these 4 buttons selected, and what we need to do, by default, the button all should be active. So what we'll do is we have already selected the button. So to add the selected class to all, we'll say all.classList.add. We need to add the class selected. So I've already created a class named selected. What it does, it just changes the background and changes the style of the button. Let's refresh it and we can see by default this one is active. Now let's move on to applying what will happen when you click on active button, completed or clear completed. So after this, let's go ahead and implement the simplest one, that is clear completed. So to add an event listener on clear completed, we'll say clear.add event listener of type click, and when that happens you have to call this function. And the first thing we need to do is to remove all the to-dos that is completed. How can you do that? So we'll use filter to do that. So we'll say all to-dos dot filter. Filter accepts a callback function, and that callback function gets access to to-do. And from here I need to filter on the basis of to-do dot is done. So if is done is false, you need to give it to me, otherwise not. So let's store it into a variable called not completed. And what we can do, so now we have got the not completed to-dos, we need to update our UI. And to update the UI, we have a function called create UI. Create UI accepts an array, as you can see it here. By default, it defaults to all to-dos. So we can pass not completed. Refresh it here and click on clear completed. So it is gone. But let's see what happens as soon as you add a new to-do, that is new to-do, press enter, you will see those all to-dos came back. And the reason for that is because we did not update our single source of truth, that is all to-dos. Only if we update, it will remain in that way. So the way we can do it is filter all to-dos and update all to-dos at the same time. And here we don't have to pass any function because we know we have already updated all to-dos, and in that way it will be updated. Let's check it out. So click on clear completed. We can see only learn react is there. Add a new to-do by saying new to-do, press enter, and you can see there are only two to-dos. Let's mark learn react to be completed. Click on clear completed. This is gone. Let's add new one calling new to, and we have this. So clear completed is working properly. So now moving on to the next one, that is active and completed. We'll add an event listener on active by saying active.add event listener. We are listening for the type of click, and when that happens we need to call this function. In this function, whenever you click on active, you just need to display all the active to-dos. So which one is the active to-do, which one is not completed. So we'll say let not completed is equal to, and we'll do the same thing that we did earlier. We'll filter it out and update the UI using create UI and pass not completed. Refresh it, click on active, and you can see only to-dos that is not completed is visible here. So this is working. The only thing that is not working is we need to make this one active. So for that, what we'll do is we'll update our default selected to active now. Or let's name it active button. That is easier to remember. And here we'll say if active button is equal to active, then we need to add a class to active. So we'll say active.classList.add selected. Forget to update active button. So we'll say update active button, because we have clicked on it. So active button should be equal to active. And you can see active is active now. The only thing we need to do is to remove active from other one. So here we need to remove the selected from all. So you can see that it is getting very complicated, that we have to add one and we have to remove another. And simplest way to solve this problem is by writing a function. We'll write update active button. So all it needs is which button do you have to make it active. So we'll make a function called update active button, and what it need to do is, and you just need to pass the button you want to make active. Say for example, you'll pass active or something like that. We'll call it btn. And here we'll say if btn is equal to all, you have to make all dot class list dot add. We need to add a class of selected. So if it is all. Other cases, if button is active, so active will be added selected class. Similarly, we'll also check for completed. Then we need to add it to completed. And at last, the important thing we need to do is, so let's do it this way. What we should be doing is, first we will be removing the class of selected from all of it, and then we'll add it to one of them, because at one time only one will be right. So what I can do is I'll say remove it from all, remove it from active, remove it from completed. So as soon as this function will be called, this function will accept a parameter like selected, all, or active. And based on that, the first thing it will do is to remove the selected class for all of them. And based on the condition, it will run this function. So we don't even have to do this outside here. All we need to do is to call this function. And by default, it will default to active button because that is the value we are updating. And first thing we need to do is to call this function and see if it is working or not. So in the starting, you can see it defaults to all. What if we change the value of this here? So we can say active, save, refresh, and you can see active is selected, everything else is not selected. So by default, all will be selected. So now it will make our life a lot more easier. So here we are saying active.add event listener, go ahead and look for it. We don't have to do all this. All we need to do is to update the active button and call update active button, and it will work. So we have all in the start. Click on active, it is displaying and everything is gone. Similarly, we'll implement the completed feature. So let's go ahead and do that. So we'll say completed.add event listener of type click. When that happens, you have to look for all the completed only. So when todo.isDone is true, return, and we'll call completed to-dos. We'll call create UI with this variable. Along with that, we have to change active button to completed, and we just have to call this function update active button. Let's see. So we have 3 to-dos. 2 of them is completed. When we click on active, we can see one. When we click on completed, we can see both of it. When we click on all, it is not working yet. So we'll make that work too. So similarly, let's go back and add event listener on all of type click. And what we need to do, we need to just call the function because all needs to display everything. So we'll call the function create UI, we'll update active button to all, and we'll call this function. Refresh it. Let's go ahead and add some to-dos. So we'll say play basketball, play badminton. And here we have 5 to-do list. So when we click on active, you can see there are 3. When we click on completed, we see 2. When we come back and click on all, we can see all the to-do list. As soon as we will click on clear completed, it will clear all the things and it will go back to all. Click on active, these are all active. Completed, there is none. So this is how you need to make it work. So few things to notice here is, we created a small function that takes care of updating the buttons. Why we did that? So writing this function once and calling it multiple times will make your life easier as a programmer. So all we did here is to add event listener on all these 4 different buttons, and based on different buttons, you are doing different things. Say clear is clearing all the completed to-dos, and this one is changing the original data. Similarly, active, when you click on active, it only displays all the to-dos that is not completed. Completed, when you click on it, it only shows to-do that is completed. So for example, I complete play basketball, it will only show play basketball. So in this way, we were able to complete to-do application fully by implementing all the features like add to-do, delete to-do, toggle to-do, all, active, completed, clear completed, and all of it. So only one feature is left to implement, and that is to add support for local storage. Say here we have a dummy data right now. That's why it is showing all this data. What if I just delete this and make it empty? Refresh it and you'll not find anything. Let's go ahead and add to-do list. So we'll say learn DOM, play basketball, play badminton, and we refresh the page because of some reason. As soon as you do that, so all the data that we had is gone now. So we need to add local storage support. We already learned about local storage. So the way you add data to local storage is by saying local storage.set item. You pass the name of the item, that is data, and you can pass any data here. Say for example 21. Now if you want to access that, you can say local storage.get item. I want to access data. So we'll say data and we'll get 21. Important thing to notice is local storage always stores data into string format. So whenever you are adding a non-primitive data type, that is an array or object, you will have to convert it into string by using json.stringify. If we don't do it, let's see what happens. So A, B, press enter, and if we try to access it, our array got converted into string because that is what local storage does. So the way to do that is when you are adding the data, you have to stringify it by using json.stringify. Now if you try doing this in this way and access the value, you will see that you got the value, and the way to convert this into array again, you just have to use json.parse and it got back into array. So this is what we are going to do. So the most important data we have is all to-dos. So whenever you are adding to do, you have to update the local storage. So update local storage will say local storage.set item. It accepts two parameters. The first parameter is the key of the data. So we'll say all to-dos. And the value that we are going to send is coming from all to-dos, this one. But the way to send it is by using json.stringify, and we'll send all to-dos. Let's check it out if it works or not. So if you look at local storage, you'll not find anything. Let's clear it out. Refresh the page. Let's go ahead and add a to-do list, play basketball, and press enter. Now look at local storage, and you'll find that in your local storage you have your data, that is play basketball. Similarly, if you do it again, play badminton, press enter. Now if you look at it again, you'll find that both the things are there, play basketball, play badminton. Now let's try to refresh this page. When we refresh this page, it is gone. But if you look at local storage, it is still there. Why? Because local storage persists the data. So what we are going to do is, whenever this application is loading, all I need to check is, does local storage.get item of name all to-dos exist in local storage or not? If it does, what you need to do, you need to parse that data. So how I'm going to parse it? By using json.parse. So we'll say json.parse, and here we will be doing this. If it doesn't exist, go ahead and fall back to empty array. So now let's refresh it. And what will happen is we are saying let's say get item. Refresh it, and you can see it is retrieving the information from local storage. Now the only problem that will happen is when you click on completed and refresh it, it is not completed. Why? Because we are not updating it when we are doing it here. So all we need to do is this line of code that is updating all these things. You can write it inside a different function and do it different times, but I'm just going to copy paste for now. Whenever you are updating the state, you have to update your local storage. So remember that when you are clear completed, you are updating your state, but in these two cases, you are not updating your state. So let's see if it works properly or not. So refresh this page, it stays like that. Click on completed, it stays like that. Delete it, it stays like that. Let's add learn DOM. Click on it, refresh it, it stays like that. Click on active, click on clear completed, all, refresh it, and we have the data updated. So in this way, we have added support for local storage also, and added the feature of all active completed and clear completed.